Should you use your autofocus when filming underwater? That's the question we'll be answering in today's video. Coming up. Hi everyone, welcome to the channel and thank you very much for tuning in again. My name is Matthias and you're watching the Underwater Filmmaking School. Today we'll talk about a slightly controversial topic. We'll talk about whether or not you should be using your autofocus on your camera when filming underwater. Now let me clarify first a few things. First of all, not every camera has the option to use manual focus, not just underwater but in general. So in that case, obviously, yes, you are going to be using autofocus because that's the only thing that you are able to work with. But once you start working with larger systems, like here, for example, the GH5 in a Nauticam housing, you will then obviously have the option to choose whether or not you do want to use the autofocus or you would rather stick to using the manual focus underwater. Now, once you start filming underwater as a beginner and you seek out the advice of more experienced shooters, most of them will tell you to never ever use the autofocus when filming underwater. There is a good reason for that advice too. Now, underwater we do normally have a lot more particles in the water, so in between our lens and the object that we're filming, compared to in air if we're filming something out of the water. And an autofocus can sometimes have a challenging time deciding whether it wants to focus on your actual object or any of the particles in between. This normally happens when you're diving in very plankton-rich water, places where you can see plankton-feeding animals like manta rays, whales, sharks, all that sort of stuff. So in these conditions, I agree, it's probably better to just use your manual focus and not leave it up to the camera to decide where it wants to focus on. But as long as you have relatively clear water and good conditions, it is actually not a big issue to use autofocus with most cameras that allow that underwater. Now I don't use only manual focus or only autofocus when shooting underwater. Most of the time I'm actually using a combination of the two. Now here is how I do it. When I'm approaching an object that I want to put my focus on underwater, I get myself into the distance that I want to be in, and what I do then, I have my camera set on autofocus, then press your shutter halfway so the camera will focus and will tell you where it's focusing. The GH5 does that with a little green square in the framing, so it tells you where the focus has actually been put on in your frame. And then you have two options. You can either use the auto focus and auto exposure lock, which is a little lever on the side of the housing on the GH5, and what that does is basically lock your focus and your exposure to what you have at this moment. So basically this means that even now if a little particle swims in front of your lens, the autofocus is not going to kick in and it's not going to refocus on the other object, on that particle that just swam into your frame. It also means though, if you are losing distance or if you change the distance in between yourself and your object, you might lose focus on your object. So it is quite crucial to keep kind of the same distance to your object if you're using that method. Now, with using that method, you're not really taking any advantage of the focus peaking that the GH5 offers. So therefore, it's kind of hard to judge whether or not the object that you really want to have in focus is in focus, in particular if you're doing macro work. Now, there's also a solution for that, and that's the second option, how you can combine auto and manual focus. So again, you're in autofocus on your camera, so either continuous or autofocus single. Again, press the shutter half to focus on the object of desire, and then instead of activating the autofocus and auto exposure lock, you will just switch to manual focus. So just switch the lever over to manual focus, and what happens then is, again, you're in manual focus now, so the autofocus is not going to kick in if anything comes into your frame, but, and this is the big advantage with this method, you actually have focus peaking now. So you can see exactly what is in focus, and if you see that you've changed your position just slightly and your object has come out of focus, you can reposition yourself, readjust to get your object back into the perfect focal position. Now, what also helps keeping focus on the object that you want to have underwater is to make sure that as long as you're in a wide angle shooting scenario, always try to keep your aperture to about 8.0 or higher. Therefore, you're going to keep your depth of field wider and more of your entire framing will be in focus. And it doesn't make such a big difference whether or not you're moving slightly towards or away from your object. You won't really notice that too much. So that's just another extra tip there for you guys. Right, and that's basically it. So this is my tip on how you can combine autofocus and manual focus on a camera that allows doing that and take advantage of both systems, so you don't have to fumble around with the focus ring trying to find focus while you're floating in mid-water. You can use your autofocus, let them do the work for you, finding the perfect focus point, and then either switch to manual focus or press the autofocus and auto exposure lock so that your focus stays locked in and it won't jump on anything else that comes in front of your camera. So I hope this little pro tip was useful for you guys. If that's the case, please do hit that like button. It really does mean a lot to me, and also consider subscribing to the channel so you don't miss out on any other pro tips that will be coming out on this channel very, very shortly and regularly. So thank you very much guys for watching, and now off you go and shoot some cool underwater stuff, and I will see you next week again.